Sorry for the interruption. But due to the acidic content of the atmospheric weather condition in the economy, I have decided metal afemuntin carbo editui. For watching metal 1 Ghana cedi for jollof rice 1 cedi 20 pesos for gobe 80 pesos for kenke tamai and the cow 1 cedi 50 pesos.
You know what? Just get me water.
For sachet water 30 pesos. For bottled water 50 pesos. Oh, moka has me Vodafone cash. I'm the free. I'm free. Metal.
Transfer charges. Bida. Switch to Vodafone Cash today and enjoy 0 charges whenever you send money to all networks. Yes, sending money is free on Vodafone Cash. Only e-levy applies. Dial *110# to send money today.
Hey, MT4D. Fufu. By this time.
Vodafone.
Going far from home and not of my own. I'll be learning to cope in every place that I go. The pussy who don't see my money fear. I wanna put a smile on your face, whether home or far away. The
We are here for you as you help others along the way through the highs and lows of life. Let's get the world smiling again. Receive MoneyGram directly into your ZPay mobile money wallet.
Yo,
Abedimpo, Kwabiko Fikinata.
I see hope in your eyes. People fall and they rise. Make you no worry about the things you know we change, the things you know we do today. You go do them tomorrow.
Ooh, wow. This girl's got talent. You too can change your world, and it's affordable with MT4D data bundles.
Make it a rhythm entire body. You be the winner, and I go tell you.
MT4D. Life is simple. What does money mean to you?
It means convenience. It gives me the ability to do business at my own pace.
It allows me to live my life with ease and enjoy my lifestyle without interruptions.
Security. I can make investments I can trust, and I know exactly where my money is all the time.
Having the flexibility to do what I want to.
The feeling and peace of mind I get knowing I can safely receive remittances from my family and friends from the comfort of my home. Money means safety.
Money means so many things to so many people, but no matter what you use it for or what it may mean to you, money is the one thing that keeps us going and makes our lives a little bit brighter. So what does money mean to you? Just Momo it.
MTN.
MT4D.
Dial *715#.
Oh, again?
Yes, again, because I know what's coming.
Oh, MT4D, see, my data is finishing. Try my hotspot.
Dial *715#.
To buy airtime.
Dial *715#.
Send money to the workers.
Dial *715#.
Even the boys' night out.
Just dial *715# and get things done.
Huh?
You don't need data to bank with Stanbic. With Stanbic, imagine all the 1,001 ways you can bank without the internet. Or stressing me out.
MT4D.
Social distancing.
To register, visit stanbigbank.com.gh and click the service request button, or send a message on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at stanbigbankgh. You can also call us on 0302 815 789.
Amri, can you hear us? No.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear now.
Okay, now we can't hear you.
Can you hear me or not?
Yeah. Maybe try say something again.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. You might have to start singing.
Just to keep it going.
No, still not.
Hello, hello. Amari here.
We hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think we'll start while we get Fadila to join. So great. I have here with me Amri joining us from London. Amri, you're in London right now?
I'm in Kigali actually right now.
In Kigali, excellent. You are here on the continent with us. And here, Fadila is joining us from Cameroon. And then Kevin here is here with us in Ghana at the Accra Digital Center and live on stage. So maybe starting with you, Amri, just a quick introduction of who you are and what you do for Bbox.
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Amari Fasinakos. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Bbox. So just very quickly, more about Bbox. It's probably the most interesting part. We're a super platform that finances assets. In over 10 countries, we have rolled out about $400 million of asset financing. One of our countries is now Ghana. We've done an acquisition last year that got us to join the market. And so we finance different products that usually has a link to ESG and positive impact. So for example, we started with solar home systems. We're also financing smartphones, electric bikes, and a lot of other items we've been testing. In terms of, as we'll talk a lot about fundraising, I think something that's quite interesting is that we're a very capital-intensive business just because of the asset financing part. So we've been able to raise quite a bit of equity from a lot of big industrial players. That's because of our context. Originally, that was really based on solar home systems. So we have EDF, NG, Mitsubishi on our cap table, as well as more financial investors that have supported us. And then in every country, we raised debt in order to finance the asset financing part. So overall, we've raised about 200 million in the last 10 years.
Great. Thank you, Amri. I'll come back to you on that. Kevin, please introduce yourself. Tell us what you do and your journey so far with fundraising.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kevin Blankson. I am co-founder and chief partnership officer as well as IR lead for SWOV. And SWOV is a logistics tech company building the logistics operation system for the continent. We're helping players in the logistics space, whether mid-mile or last mile, get access to new markets and cut costs.
Good. And your journey with fundraising so far?
It's been an interesting one. We're currently raising our pre-seed round. So we did the whole bootstrapping for a while. We've done the friends and family round, and now we're currently raising from angels and early stage VCs.
Great.
It's been an interesting one to do.
Great. You know, for all of us, I guess the discussion here today is that, and Fadila has joined us also. Maybe I'll quickly let Fadila, can you hear us loud and clear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. Okay. Please, a quick introduction of, if it helps, maybe you can switch off your video. I can see you are in a car. So if it helps, you know, preserve bandwidth, feel free to switch off your video. But a quick introduction from you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fadila Chumba, and I'm the Secretary General at the African Business and Network.
Yeah, unfortunately, the connection is failing. We've lost Fadila. So what I was saying, and if Fadila joins us again, is that there's so much to do on our continent. There's so much, I mean, worldwide technology is on such an amazing trajectory, and with the potential to impact, you know, the world in so many positive ways. But of course, technology and startups and scale-ups need a lot of money to keep on investing and to growing. And especially for us in the technology environment, we are especially intensive on cash, and especially on rolling out in Africa, where the returns are even longer, it requires even more patient capital. So, Amri, perhaps your experience so far, how have you been able to, especially as a technology company, been able to engage with investors, and how have you found that experience?
No, that's a very interesting question. I think, I mean, the foundation of the business is to have very strong unit economics. I think we sell quite profitable products that have rapid payback. We're very interested in getting payback that is as quick as possible for the business. So choosing the right product and having a sort of commercial discipline, and I would say focused ambition, trying to focus on the right things, you know, and push for them quite a lot. On top of it, I think, and that's where the tech element comes a little bit into play for Bbox, is the automation and the data that we're able to leverage in order to make the operations smooth and limit the risk on our credit. So we don't do just the financing part, we're not just a digital platform, we also have the whole retail network and distribution that is on the ground, and all of this is absolutely necessary to automate. And so I think this combination is key for being able to raise money and get bigger rounds and bigger capital. And I think even if Bbox has raised a few hundred million, only at the start of the journey, really, the appetite is huge for what we do.
Thank you so much. Kevin, from your side, you are at a much earlier stage, but how have you found the experience? And especially with sorry if I interrupt you, especially, you know, is there any specific nuances to the exact technology that you are rolling out, which is around logistics?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. He said he's at the early stage when he's raised 100 million, right? And down here, any startup that raises 100 million would be super excited about that. But yeah, there are specific nuances that comes, especially with logistics. I think the headache here is the guys that came before us haven't had a lot of discipline when it came to rolling out capital. And again, logistics in itself is a very capital intensive space. And so one of the hurdles that we had to overcome was thinking around scale. How do we get the product to scale without necessarily having to move the infrastructure across the continent with us? And so it forced us to look deeper into how we could do that without necessarily destroying the space, for lack of a better phrase. And so we focused more on the tech aspect. Weirdly enough, when we started our journey, we were trying to sell or onboard logistic companies on our tech platform. But at the time, the market wasn't ready for it, right? And so we had to delve into the space, act as a player, try and understand what the space needed, and then build a tech for the space. And so now we actually have companies in the space reaching out to us, both on the postal level, both on the agri sector, both in the last mile and mid-mile distribution as well. And so by being able to focus on just on the tech aspect and understanding that the infrastructure exists everywhere you go, the issue is the tech that will be able to aggregate the infrastructure that exists in each market and then bring them online to be leveraged by the people that actually need the infrastructure. And that's been our focus around scaling our business and trying to make it grow across the continent.
Great. Yeah. And I'll throw it back to Amri that, Amri, I guess the company is now about 10 years old. How old is B-Box?
Yeah, exactly.
You're 10 years old, and I remember... Sorry?
13 years old, exactly.
13 years old.
We really started 10 years ago.
and you are headquartered out of London.
Yeah, so we have two headquarters, one in London, and there is actually a lot more fundraising centered, and one in Rwanda. There is a lot more operation focused.
In Rwanda. And then you're operating in a number of countries. So listening to what Kevin said, being headquartered out of London and being in many countries, has that made it easier to reach out to investors and to raise funding?
Yeah, I think it's more nuanced. So I think that there's definitely something good about being based in London for fundraising. I think that a lot of capital still big funds that are centered across Africa, they're based in London or the US, and it's more easy logistically, especially on the equity side. But then the negative is having the whole corporate finance team that is based in London maybe makes communication harder than we're trying to do locally. A big part of, the business that we do is to protect ourselves against currency depreciation, etc. Ghana, of course, that's been a big issue. And so we like to raise debt in local currency, and in that instance, the relationship, and the deal making is done locally. So in that respect, it's not advantageous to be in London, in the country.
But raising debt or raising funds locally versus raising funds internationally, how do you compare that experience?
There's so much variation at the end between the countries. I would say that the level of sophistication of the banking sector in different countries is quite different, and so the strategies will not necessarily work across all of the countries. We do some fairly complex structuring deals like securitization, where we sell all of our assets, take them off our balance sheet, for example, which is quite good for companies like us that need to keep it expanding. But it's not something that's been done by banks in every country where we are, and so there is a bit of a balanced distributions that we can work on depending on the country. On top of it, I think it's good to connect maybe local ecosystem with more global ecosystem. One of the things that we do, for example, is being able to secure deals with a local bank, but in partnership with another bank that will either provide guarantee or that will be able to support getting into a bigger size deal. So that's something that we've done a few times. For example, with Garico, is guarantee to a local bank the debt that we're raising, and I think that's something that I'm advised doing, and it's quite a few fun questions.
Thank you, Amri. Fadila, are you with us again?
Yes, I'm back with you.
Okay, thank you. We will happily listen to you. A quick introduction. We've had some discussions on fundraising, for business in the continent. I'd love to hear your experience and what you are doing in that sector.
Thank you very much, Sakib, for having me today. My name is Fadila, and I'm the Secretary General at the African Business Angel Network. So essentially, we mainly focus on early stage investment, starting with angel investors. So today, ABAN has about 63 angel networks spread in more than 34 African countries and the diaspora. And last year, early stage investors, angel investors were able to deploy approximately $400 million on the continent. And we hope that number will increase over time. So Sakib, just to answer your question, early stage investing, specifically angel investing, is a very nascent sector on the continent. So in 2015, when ABAN started this work, there were only around $150 million attracted by startups on the continent. And last year you saw that number grew to $5.8 billion that were attracted by startups on the continent. So you can see a significant growth. But angel investing being a very at its early stage, we have seen also that those investors are starting to getting the momentum and understanding the importance of the role in growing startups on the continent. So today you see now startups that are now also relying on angel investors' money to pretty much build that MVP stage product that they need in order to attract additional funding. So it's getting a little bit more sophisticated on the continent. Angel investors are becoming more deliberate, consistent, and they have a better appreciation of risk. And they are also more connected to a number of startups that are emerging across the continent, which makes it easier now, a little bit easier for the startup to now look into angel investors as a source of finance, given that the alternatives are quite difficult, like banks and so forth.
Great.
So I'm just going to pause there.
Now, thank you. That's very kind. My question to you, following on that, is that there's such a busy, active startup scene now across the continent, and we are seeing now not only startups but scale-ups and mature companies. Even if we consider B-Box a little bit more mature, how do you see? Is there more demand for capital, and are investors also really looking to invest, or is it still a lot of persuasion to convince investors to put money down on African technology companies?
I think, Sakib, that has been done. And today we have a track record of companies that have emerged on the continent, showing that Africa is truly presenting opportunities that we will not find elsewhere in the world. That being said, we also have a great understanding of stakeholders that are operating within the continent. They have noted that it's very clear that there's a new dimension of value creation on the continent. And these are the startups. They are the empires of the future. And I believe that those that will actually become billionaires and multi-billionaires, those companies have not yet been created. And you have seen very well that recently the McKinsey portfolio or report stated that in terms of fintech, only on the continent, we're only at 3% to 5% penetration rate. So if we just look at fintech and look at the spectrum of that sector and the value chain of that sector, each part within the value chain, multiple companies can be created and they will generate value and solve issues that people on the continent are facing.
Great. Thank you so much, Fadila. Thank you. Kevin, you've been, how easy or difficult has it been for you, to raise money locally versus internationally? And what has convinced investors, in your opinion, to talk to you or to even consider your company as an investment vehicle?
I think it's relatively easier to get foreign capital than local capital. From my experience, it's been that local capital isn't as patient as foreign capital, right? And like Fadila said, angels are doing a good job or a great job in supporting startups with the patient capital that they need. I think it made it easier once we figured out our registration outside Ghana, and so we do all the raising that we do outside of Ghana. And for the longest time, we tried avoiding local capital just because of the patient aspect of it. But it got to a point where it also became a barrier to some extent that we didn't have local capital in addition to the foreign capital. I think it would get easier for startups to raise capital if the local investors or local angels understood that, yes, it's nice to have certain criteria or metrics that startups need to fit before they are ready to receive money, but they also need to look at the various aspects or various dynamics that each startup faces, right? Yes, there's a lot of capital rushing to fintech, and so it's forcing a lot of other startups to try and embed some kind of finance in there, just so that they could also seem attractive enough for investors. But if we're able to look at other supporting areas other than the fintech space or the more developed space, you actually realize that there's a lot more opportunity to leverage, because like she said, only about 3% of the market has been penetrated. And so it's up to angels in a way to de-risk startups, to allow them to take the bold risks that they actually want to take, and be able to penetrate that available market.
Yeah, great. Just a quick follow-up, specifically with regards to fundraising for specific segments. Okay. Fintech and technology across Africa is a huge segment. I mean, have you found opportunities or challenges in specifically raising money for your specific segment, or specifically because you are based in Ghana, right, versus being maybe based out of Kenya or Kigali? How has that impacted your discussions with potential investors?
It most definitely has. Logistics is a super hard space to raise for, in my opinion. I think if you're able to focus on the tech aspect of it, then you're speaking more of a language that the investors are willing to buy into. Because one of the bottlenecks to logistics is the hardware aspect of it. So for example, commerce is growing on the continent. It's no secret about that. We've realized that there are 3 things that need to be established for it to take off or to be able to grow as well as it should. You need payments, which fintech is doing a great space. You need to sell the products that are being made. But then the third aspect of this is logistics. But at the same time, that's where the most risk stays, because we are actually the ones moving the product. And so the question becomes, how do you allow startups in the space to be able to leverage the untapped market, both on the last mile and on the mid-mile, in order to seem attractive enough for foreign investors or for local investors to put their money in? But again, the risk component in there is where the biggest hurdle is. And so in comparison to, let's say, fintechs or social commerce businesses, logistic companies tend to struggle in with raising capital. It's not impossible, but we just tend to struggle a lot more than regular companies.
And then the regional focus or the specific geographic focus, is it Ghana? You know, do you think if you were in Kenya or in Nigeria or in Egypt, do you think it would have been easier or more difficult to raise money? And if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know.
Oh, I think it would have been easier to raise the money if we were elsewhere. Last year, for example, the depreciation of the cedi, right? It seriously affected the way we're thinking about
Of course,
scaling.
even valuations, revenue and valuations.
Exactly, right? It forced us to look beyond Ghana as a market to play in. So as we're speaking right now, we're in conversations to roll out in East Africa. And again, because they're a lot more connected than we technically are in West Africa, through one conversation, we're getting access to multiple markets in the space. In that kind of conversation, you're going to be more attractive if you're in the East African space than you're in the West African space. Again, the language barriers, the border barriers, the little nuances between each country or city that you're operating with. And so as a company either based in Nigeria because you have the market or based in East Africa because you have the connectivity, you seem a lot more interesting for investors in comparison to companies that are only operating in Ghana, because the Ghanaian GDP is relatively smaller in comparison.
Great, thank you. Amri, it's the same question to you. You know, considering you call yourself a platform. You know, I think you started out, you know, leasing solar panels, and you're now looking at doing many more things. And so I guess you have, especially because of your leasing component, a very heavy, a more specific demand on financing. You know, how has that impacted your capability to raise money? You know, I guess part of it is for your operations and part of it is for your leasing capability. Have I understood that right? And then adding on to that, again, the geographic distribution. Has that helped, hindered operating in so many countries? Has that, you know, brought out specific challenges, or has it generally made it easier to expand and to raise money?
That's super interesting because, on really the operation side, when we're raising debt, it's just to finance a boring business. You know, that's how we present it banks. You know, we don't try to make it sound fancy or technology-driven, etc. Because the banks don't care about the 10-year projections that we have. They care about, are we going to make money on the products that we finance in the next 12, 18, maximum 30 months, right? So it's really about the story that you have to tell, right? And on the debt side, that I talked quite a bit already, it's totally different from the equity story that we're telling, where we're talking a lot more on the equity story about where we have an unfair advantage through technology, by creating a platform, by being able to rapidly expand across the continent and manage thousands of people across 10 different countries and in very rural areas. And that equity story is much more long. And in that respect, it's often funds that are based out of Africa that we raise money with. And I share a bit like what Suv was saying, because it's so important to not just be based in one country. I mean, from a risk perspective, you know, there is always going to be a potential problem that will happen in one country, because it's very good risk mitigations. But then also on the equity story, it's a lot more attractive to be in either, for example, Kenya, that is very quick to adopt new technology, or in a huge market like Nigeria. So the way that we've looked at expansion has been a bit of a combination. I mean, because we started from the solar side, we work with governments quite closely sometimes. So we have an opportunistic approach in some instances where we partner with governments on electrification, but the large majority is very much driven by market potential and by being able to show the growth that we'll be able to have in the next few years. So, for example, that's the reason one of our, by far the highest growing markets is Nigeria.
Thank you. Fadila, you know, passing that question to you from the other side, you know, representing angel investors, You know, and we've all heard the wonderful stories of how, you know, Flutterwave, Paystack have raised so much money, and that's been helpful to all of us. But I wonder if it's also created unrealistic expectations on both sides. So passing the question over to you, you know, which areas are you seeing demand for from investors? What do your investors want to put money in? And what do they expect in return? What kind of companies are they looking to put money into? Fadila, can you hear us? Well, we can't hear you. While we're waiting for Fadila, maybe just to ask how much more time we have as a panel. 10 more minutes, great, thank you. So maybe, Amri, you can answer that question. You know, you're talking about Nigeria, you know, which of course, it's a very difficult market, but it's also seeing a lot of demand. Are you operating in Nigeria? And how has that played into your rollout plans?
Yes, we have opened Nigeria last year. I think the way that we do the valuation of business and fundraising, etc., is that we do accumulate the country's growth, and of course, you know, in real terms, Nigeria is not yet the biggest country for Bbox, as we have only opened a year ago, but it's growing so fast, and market potential is so big that it represents a very big part of the valuation reasoning actually in the future. One of the things that we believe very strongly actually at Bbox is that being in multiple countries offers a big strategic advantage, because we face many challenges country per country. Let's say, you know, there's always going to be one or two countries with high depreciation, with elections, with
sorry, Amri, I think Fadila is now coming back on. If you just hold on for a second. Fadila, please go ahead if you can hear. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Did you hear my question? No, Fadila, sorry, we've lost you again. I guess it's part of the challenge of operating in the continent, you know, and trying to be in tech. We are always the first to face these tech issues ourselves. Yeah. I think I want to thank the panel for the wonderful discussions, and quickly open up for one or two questions. I guess we're getting close to the end of our time. Maybe a closing remark from both Kevin and then from Amri, and then I'm happy to take one or two questions from the audience. Kevin, any closing remarks or thoughts for us?
I think I'm excited for what's coming. The market may not be looking too great, but there's still some excitement in the startup space, at least here in Ghana.
What is it that excites you?
The opportunity. Everywhere you go, there's chaos and there's
thank you.
It's actually opportunity to set up. So yeah, excited about that.
Great. Amri, from your side, your closing remarks.
First, thanks a lot for having me. It was really informative and great to hear from you. I look forward to the questions. I think for me, something that I found quite important and quite topical at the moment, you know, is that fundraising is not as easy as it used to be 1 or 2 years ago, and so we need to be a little bit mindful of that. Africa has a lot of potential, a lot of growth that is going through, and I think there is still some interest, but there is a big focus on profitability. I don't think many people can pull the rounds that have been pulled in the last 2 years, especially in fintech, for example, without hitting profitability. There is still a lot of capital that is available, but I think they're a lot more strict in terms of companies that will be profitable and that have at least half profit. And that's a big movement and change in terms of funding sector.
Amri, one question I have, maybe just quickly to extend is on the issue of impact. You know, that do you consider yourself an impact-based company? You know, you spoke about the ESGs, and how does that play into fundraising? You know, I've spoken to people who say, well, everything in Africa is impact. You know, so why are you so special? You know, what do you say to that?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, right? I think that Bebox really started from the perspective of doing solar. So you had both an ecological and an impact on livelihoods, etc. That is very real. Now that we've expanded to a lot of different things, we still believe we have a very positive impact. For example, selling a smartphone allows people to contribute. We help people to contribute financially, to be more connected, etc. And you can always push the narrative. I think that is useful, and I think that's something that should be part of the story. And I think it's not just true for startups working in Africa. It's true for a big petroleum company across the world, right? One of the things that is important is that, yes, impact is important, and it's really like you have to have it, but it doesn't replace the key fundamentals of business.
Great. Thank you for that answer. Thank you. We'll happily take questions now from the audience, if there are any questions.
Hello, Seke.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much for the discussion. I just wanted to ask a question around, the popular areas. I think you asked, Zagip, you asked a question, but we didn't get quite an answer. I mean, the former panels, we listened to how, from the Bank of Ghana, that everything was around payments. So which other sector, outside of just pure payments are exciting, and we see a real big potential there? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I was hoping Fadila would answer that question. Fadila, are you able? Great. Good. So the question is, which areas beyond payments, do you see demand for in technology from investors, or where do you see potential for growth?
Well, I see it across sector, really. You have agriculture, or you can put it this way, climate smart agriculture sector. Any ventures that are emerging within that sector would make it big. You have clean technology. Of course, you have to be quite careful on how you address issues related to energy on the continent, and the solution that you're providing, making sure that they're commercial and accessible and affordable for your customers. And of course, you have any solution related to making our cities a lot more smarter on the continent. So you have mobility, you have healthcare, you have education. Essentially, you have to look at solving issues on the continent and using technology to provide a solution that can be scalable. And that's when you become interesting, because you're solving issues at scale. So you have opportunity on the continent across the sector. It depends on how you're going to structure your company and the capacity of that company to grow. Would they just grow, or would they be able to scale? Because there's a big difference between the two.
Great. Thank you, Fadila.
I hope I answer your question.
Thank you very much. And thank you, panel. That was a fantastic end to the discussion. We're out of time. Amri, thank you so much for joining us from Kigali. Fadila, thank you. I hope we didn't stress you on your journey, but thank you for making time. And Kevin, thank you. And God willing, we continue the discussions. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Sakib and his panel. Very, very insightful conversations.
Thank you.
I think we can take a photo. Yeah, let's take a photo. Right. Okay, we're far behind time, so we're quickly going to run through the rest of the sessions, and hopefully we're able to cover as much as possible. The next conversation we'll be having will be on data protection for the digital financial industry. And
thank you.
This will be moderated. Yes, another round of applause for them. This will be facilitated by Quentin Akrobeto. Quentin is the Director for Data Protection Agency. A round of applause for Quentin as he joins us. Right. Oh, he's coming. A round of applause for him, please.
Okay. Good evening. Hello. All right, good afternoon. As my name has been mentioned, Acrobot Quinton, and I'm the Director for Regulatory and Compliance. I'm representing the Data Protection Commission today, and I'm in the stead of the Executive Director, Madam Patricia Edusei-Poku. I'm here with two of my colleagues, the Director for Operations and also the Head for Accreditation and Training. We don't have much time, so I'm going to run through the slides. Okay, so all the slides that we are skipping, I'm going to summarize it into one slide. For the industry, the fintech industry in Ghana, we know we are growing very fast, and it's been estimated that Ghana is one of the fastest fintech markets within the African region. While we celebrate this success, it is also important for us to appreciate the risks of exposure to the privacy and personal data of individuals who are at the core of these financial technologies and also digital tools that we introduce. Next, please. Next. So, the Data Protection Commission was actually established in Section 46 of the Data Protection Act, Act 843, and given the functions as follows: to implement and monitor compliance with the provisions of Act 843. So, anyone who processes personal data, we call them data controllers actually. So for data controllers, it is the work of the Commission to ensure that they comply with the provisions of the Act. Then we also have as a function to make administrative arrangements that we consider appropriate for the discharge of our duties. So we have some provisions in the Act, but where the Act does not cover a particular activity that will enable us function effectively, we are given the rights and the privileges to do those administrative arrangements to discharge our duties. We also receive complaints from the general public, the citizenry, and also data subjects. When we receive these complaints, it's our function to investigate these complaints and then determine whether data controllers have actually processed personal data fairly or not fairly, and then we implement the appropriate sanctions. Then Section 46 of the Act again creates the Data Protection Register, which the Commission has the mandate to keep and maintain at all times. Some few definitions. Consent. It is important for those of us within this space to appreciate and understand what these terminologies mean as far as processing personal data is concerned. So I'm going to run us through it briefly. Consent is any freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous wish of a data subject in agreement to the processing of their personal data. So I've mentioned some few words. Specific. When we say specific, it must be explicit. When you say you have consent to process personal data, it must be evidential. You must be able to prove that, yes, this person agreed to the processing of their personal data, either by a click or by signing or by a document that shows that, yes, the individual has agreed to the processing of their personal data. Then we have data subjects. Data subjects is any individual who is identifiable within a data set. So we have data sets like your name, your picture, your biometric data, and any other thing that can identify you as the individual. That is your personal data. So anyone who is identifiable in that personal data is the data subject. Then we have data controllers who are entities or individuals who jointly or individually process or determine how personal data should be processed within their entities or organizations. Then we have data processors who process personal data on behalf of data controllers on written instructions. So we have agents that we work with as fintech companies, as banks. We have agents that we have signed contracts with. These agents who process personal data on our behalf are classified as what? Data processors. Then we have processing. We say any activity at all that you conduct on a set of data, we refer it as well processing, and it includes viewing, collecting, disposal, storing, or any other thing that you could use that personal data you have collected for. We classify as processing. Please, next slide. So this is where I'll dwell on a bit, and I believe I'll be done. We have 8 principles of data protection, and anyone who processes personal data is expected to demonstrate these principles in their processing. The first one talks about accountability. When you process personal data, you must demonstrate accountability by being proactive. One of the steps you need to take by being proactive as a data controller will be to register with the commission. You must demonstrate accountability by being open to data subject or whoever you collect personal data from. Your privacy statement, your privacy policies are all things that you put in place to demonstrate to the data subject or people whom we do business with that we respect their privacy and that we collect their personal data for a particular purpose. So you need to let them know that you are accountable for the personal data you collect from them. Then we have lawfulness of processing. You must have a lawful basis, a legal basis for which you collect personal data. You don't collect personal data just because you are doing business. So I think I need your information, I need your information, I need your information. No. You must have a legal basis. The business you are doing, do you have the lawful basis for saying that I need to collect this person's name, I need to know your wife's name, I need to know your parents' name? You must have the legal basis for collecting this. The lawfulness of processing also requires that we are fairly in our processing. We process personal data fairly. So you don't request or collect personal data for one particular purpose and then use it for any other purpose just because you are holding or the personal data is in your custody. You must process personal data fairly. It's one of the principles of data protection. Then we also talk of specification of purpose. As I mentioned earlier, if you are collecting personal data, you must collect it for a specific purpose. And that purpose must be made known to the individual from whom you are collecting the personal data. Then we have compatibility of processing. Whatever you collected the personal data for, if in the future you want to use that same information or personal data for any other purpose, you must go back to the data subject. If the purpose for which you are going to use it for is not compatible, does not comply with the initial purpose of collection, you must go back to them. So at any point in time of your processing, you must ensure that the purpose for which the data was collected, you are processing in line with that purpose. At any point in time that it changes, you must get back to the data subject to seek their consent to know whether you have their consent or approval to process differently while you collect their personal data. Then we have quality of information. The personal data that we collect from individuals, data subjects, we must at any point in time ensure they are intact, they are up to date, and they are accurate. And it will lead us to one other principle, which requires that at any point in time, data subjects should be given the opportunity to update their records. But what the point we are making here is that any personal data that we have in our custody, as data controllers, as entities, we must ensure it is up to date, it is accurate, and always available when it is needed by the data subject or any other regulator. Then we have openness. As I mentioned earlier, we must demonstrate accountability by being open to data subjects. Why do we collect your personal data? What are we going to use it for? How long are we going to keep it? Whom are we going to share it with? And if we no longer have need of it, how are we going to dispose of this? We must be open to the data subject or individuals. We must let them know that indeed we are accountable for whatever purpose for which we collect their personal data. Then we have data security safeguards. Section 28 of the Act requires that anyone who processes personal data must implement appropriate, necessary, technical, organizational measures to ensure the sanctity of the personal data that we have collected. We must implement security safeguards to ensure that at any point in time, the data is intact and accurate, and that it doesn't fall into the hands of people who are not supposed to have it. So in our processing, who within our setup can have access? Is it that anybody at all, because the data is with us, anybody at all can come in and then see or request for it? Or there are processes that we have put in place to ensure that accessing personal data is on need-to-know basis. These are the principles that we need to be looking out for and then demonstrating that indeed we are accountable. Then the last one is about data subject participation. As I mentioned earlier, we need to allow the people from whom we have collected personal data participate in our processing, because it is their personal data. And at any point in time, one, they must come back, they are able to come back to ask for an update of it. They are able to come back and perhaps withdraw whatever consent they gave you initially. They have the right to object to your processing of their personal data or withdraw the consent they initially gave you. It is their right. And these are the 8 principles that anyone who processes personal data must demonstrate accountability to. Next, please. All right, so what will be the obligations of data controllers, banks, fintechs, or any other person within the fintech industry? One, you must register with the Data Protection Commission. As I mentioned, that's Section 46 requires of us. And then renew every 2 years. So your license, your data protection license expires every 2 years. And you must make efforts at renewing it. You must equally appoint a data protection supervisor, especially where you are a large data controller and you control huge amounts of personal data. You must appoint a data protection supervisor who will assist you in your compliance program. Then you must implement appropriate and technical organizational measures, as I mentioned in reference to Section 28, that you must implement appropriate technical and organizational measures. Data controllers must do this. Then implement data protection policies. So we have retention policies, we have privacy policies, we have privacy statements, we have disposal policies. All these ones must be put in place to demonstrate your accountability to data subjects. Then you must implement appropriate security measures, as I mentioned earlier with the bullet 3. You must also give instruction to processors. So the agents that we work with, the people we contract to process personal data on our behalf, the cloud service providers, or any other person that we contract to do business on our behalf, there must be written contracts, written instructions as to how they must process the personal data you hand over to them, how long they must keep it, what measures or technical and security measures they must implement to ensure the sanctity of the data you have, the personal data you have given them. You must document this, and they must commit to it by signing. For instance, we have CISA, specific information sharing agreement, should feature in the contract we sign with our processors. Then we have notification of compromises and breaches. Section 31 of the Act requires that at any point in time in our processing, where we lose data to wrongful persons, or where we wrongfully direct personal data to people that are not supposed to have access to it, don't sit on it. The Act requires that the individuals whose data we have wrongly fired to others must be notified, so that if there is any remedial action they must take to secure their privacy, they do that. And it doesn't end there. The Data Protection Commission must also be put into the know that this is what has happened, so that they can assist you into implementing corrective measures to ensure that in the future you don't have such problems again, or at least it is reduced to the barest minimum. Next, please. So what will be the importance of registering with the Data Protection Commission? It is mandatory to register with the Commission, as the ASI, Section 27 and 53. Actually, 53 makes it criminal if you process personal data without registering with the Data Protection Commission. Then it is your first effort towards accountability. At least let your data subjects know that yes, you are registered with the Data Protection Commission and that your compliance is checked from time to time. It will assist you in avoiding prosecution and fines. As I mentioned, Section 56 prescribed fines for you not registering with the Data Protection Commission, yet processing personal data. Then it also prevents credibility and reputational loss. Let me use this opportunity to say this here. This year for the Data Protection Commission is a year of enforcement and compliance audits. We want to ensure accountability. And institutions that are processing personal data without registering with the Commission, or even registered with the Commission but are not processing personal data in compliance with the provisions of the Act, will be prosecuted. The process had already begun. I'm not going to go into details, but I want you to take it from me. It's going to happen this year, and you don't want to lose your credibility as an entity or as an institution, because by the time the law processes or the court processes end, we are going to publish all the processes in the dailies for Ghanaians to know, for the international world to know that you are processing personal data wrongfully or not in compliance with the Act, and it will have some reputational repercussions on your business. And lastly, avoid payment of compensation. As I mentioned, we are receiving complaints on a daily basis. Data subjects are now becoming aware of their rights under the Act. And day in, day out, they are lodging complaints of data controllers who are not processing their personal data in compliance with the Act. When these court processes go through, what is going to happen is that certain fines are going to be sanctioned on data controllers, and you want to avoid compensating data subjects for not processing their personal data in compliance with the Act. Next, please. Okay, so I've run through this in the previous slide, so I think this is where I draw the curtains on my presentation. If you have any question, please ask.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Arnold. My question is actually two. One is about location. Do we have any provision regarding location, like where data can be domiciled in Ghana? And then the second question is about, people have complained about the cost of training. And there have been instances where people have gone through training, 3 years on, they haven't received their certificates. What's the Commission's position on this?
Okay, so the Commission will not prescribe a particular place or location where you will store data, but will recommend to you what measures need to be put in place to ensure that wherever the data is kept or stored, it is stored such a way that it will not fall into the wrongful hands or unauthorized hands. Especially where it needs to go outside the shores of Ghana, there are impact assessments that the Commission will take you through to ensure that wherever it is being stored, it is secure enough to protect the privacy of the individual whose data will be taken offshore. And then your second question is about certificates. Yes, it is true. I'm not going to delve too much into it, but I want to give you the assurance that this year, certificates will be issued. It was as a result of some security issues, but all those issues have been resolved. And this year, we are going to have an event where all those who have been trained will be issued out their certificates. Take my word on it. Please.
Hello, thank you very much. I want to find out on awareness programs. Can you brief us a little bit about some of the awareness programs that you embark on before the enforcement? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. In terms of awareness, we have done quite a number of awareness. As we speak, what I'm doing here is awareness. We have two types of awareness. We have the bespoke awareness and the free awareness. Bespoke is tailor-made to your institution. Exactly what you require from us is what we are going to train you on or give you the awareness on. Then we have the free one, like this one. We engage the public, and then we do the awareness program. We have walk-in sessions, and then we have webinars that we organize from time to time. And during the Privacy Week, it will interest you. In 3 days, in a 3 days webinar, we engage over 500 individuals. Teaching them what their requirements are and what their rights are and what they are supposed to do to remain compliant. So these are the various forms of awareness that we have. And then lastly, on the cost of training, what we charge for training is not the prerogative of the Commission. They are parliamentary approved fees. However, we have accredited institutions who run the training, and they also have to actually cover up their production costs. So you have a little margin on what Parliament has actually approved for us to charge. And that is what it is. We will not charge any other thing beyond that.
All right. You're talking to fintechs, right?
Yes.
And then you know that these fintechs don't really have money.
Really?
And so if the Commission is charging 10,000 cedis per individual to get trained, that's not even for the certificate, because you pay for the certificate, and then you need to send somebody over to be trained, and then you have to pay 10,000 cedis, sometimes even more. I paid 11,000 in 2020.
Really?
Yeah, she's here. I'm not. Yeah, yeah. So if that's the case, then it increases the cost of compliance on the person, And it makes it very difficult for them to even go through the process to be properly certified. So I think the pricing part is something that you really have to look at, especially because you are starting out and trying to, like you talk about advocacy and then trying to make sure that more people get into be compliant. It's important that you look at pricing, because otherwise it just makes it difficult for schools, everyone else to come on and, pay all of this. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That is well noted. But I mentioned earlier that we have levels of data controllers. We have large data controllers, we have medium data controllers, and we have small data controllers. It is not all this category of data controllers that train certified data protection supervisors. Some do not. Some can acquire it as a service, actually. So that is the difference. It is only for large data controllers. So long as the parliamentary approved fees classifies you as a large data controller, you are forced to do that. And it is also because there are other factors that would determine whether you are a large data controller, medium or small. So where you are small, medium, you may not actually go for the training. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Quentin Akrobeto. Thank you so much. All right. And that's the Nkambomye Cultural Group. Ladies and gentlemen, I also wanted us to acknowledge the presence of the CEO of MTN, Selom Adade Voice, in the house. A round of applause for him. Right, the next session will be moderated by Ernest Opoku. Ernest Opoku is Head of External Affairs and Regulatory at Vodafone Ghana. Before he comes in, we'll quickly have to, can we arrange the chairs again? So just kindly give us some music whilst we quickly do that. Get back to the music very soon. Let's welcome Ernest on stage as he sets the ground before we get to the main panel discussion. So Ernest, a round of applause for him as he joins me here.
Good afternoon. As you can see, I'm a bit of a Luddite, so I'm using a book.
Yeah.
Everybody's come up with tablets, and it's all fancy stuff. Okay, so my name is Ernest Opoku. I'm with Vodafone, and I deal with external affairs and regulatory affairs for the company.
We can deal with that after.
Sorry? Okay. I can see some long faces. Just bear with us. This is just going to be like about 45 minutes. Some really interesting stuff coming. We've heard a lot about 3G, 4G, and 5G, which is supposedly the future. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I introduce my guests, I want to just go on this exercise with me. So there's a friend of mine who came from, where is it, Arkansas or someplace like that. And he was bragging to me that he's bought a new
Tesla Model Y. And then he proceeds to open up an app, and then he taps on something and his garage lights come on. We see it on his screen. And then he taps on something else, and then we see the diagnostics of the car on the device. He taps something else, and then the garage door opens. He climate controls the car, taps a button, and the car reverses out of the garage into the parking area. Right? This is today. And then the only link, the only thing that's missing is his daughter is in one of the universities. The only thing that's missing is the fact that currently we don't have the capability to, we have the capacity to do it, but the capability to send the car across state, empty, pick the daughter up, and come and bring the daughter back home. We are this close to it. And all of that is being promised by this technology that we call 5G, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So just stick with me on this exercise, right? So the same way, I think there was a speaker from Kigali. Imagine there's somebody in that country in desperate need of some sort of resecting of some sort of cancerous tissue. It is 5G. That's the promise, is that it is 5G that's going to give us that technology that allows a doctor in Madrid, in New York, in London, to stand behind a device in that country and then operate a scalpel hundreds of thousands of miles away in order to resect that tumor. It is possible, but what we're being told is that the technology that will get us there is 5G. So today we're going to talk a bit about 5G, and I've got two really, really important people here to guide us through. So currently we're at 4G, right? And just a few stats. I think, and our speaker, I'll introduce him in a second, will do much more justice to it than I could. But we're being told that with 5G, at peak capacity, we can get 20 gigabits per second. 20 gigabits per second. A good movie on a good day is what, 1.2 gig? So you can download, 20 high-resolution movies in a second. That's at peak, right? So let's say an average. We're being told that's around about 100 megabits per second. So super fast, right? We're being told it's low latency, and we throw these words around thinking everybody understands them. But let's talk about what latency is. It's a very simple thing that means how much time does it take from data from one part of this network to move to the other part of this network? If anybody plays games, I'm an online gamer, you'll be playing a game with some pimply-faced small boy sitting in some other part of the world, and by the time the screen refreshes, you're dead. Because he shot you, because the latency is so high that the screen refresh rate doesn't allow you to play the game in real time. That's what latency is. And it applies everywhere. That's what prevents the car from Arkansas, from driving from Arkansas all the way to Texas and back. Because by the time it's sending that data back and forth, there's too much lag in between for you to make real-time decisions. So we're being told it's low latency. So I'm going to invite our two guests up here. Our main speaker, Mr. Ross Bateman. Mr. Ross Bateman, he will introduce himself better than I could, but he is the long-term special advisor to the GSMA on spectrum-related issues. He also helps him with some of the governmental affairs stuff that he does. He does this through his own consultancy. I think it's called RB Communications. Is that correct? Yeah, I think so. And then we'll also be talking to Mr. Edmond Fianco. He is the Director for Technology for the NCA. He has been dealing with all our spectrum stuff, and he's a big man in his own right. He is he was nominated to the Radio Regulations Board of the ITU, and it's a big deal. And to have somebody from Ghana on that board is an honor to have. So I'll invite Mr. Ross Bateman to come up and give us a presentation, after which we'll take some questions from you all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here today, talking to you all now. I've got to get dressed before I start this. So we always feel we're wearing the wrong clothes when we come down from Europe. And a friend of mine from the NCA a while ago gave me a very appropriate gift to wear this. So I'm going to be wearing my Ghana scarf for my presentation today. Thank you. And is the clicker? Are you clicking for me? Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work. Pointed at you. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's only clicking forward. So anyway, I'll introduce without those first two slides, no problem. Hi, my name's Ross. I work for the GSMA. I'm based in London. I work with the global policy team, and I'm here with my colleague Seni, who looks after West Africa on policy issues. I'm here to talk to you about 5G, but about one specific aspect of it, the raw materials that we need to provide before we even start providing 5G, which is radio spectrum. Radio spectrum is the lifeblood of the mobile industry, and like any infrastructure project, we need to have enough space in order to push our traffic through. Spectrum is the roads of mobile. 5G is already going well in the world. We've got over 5 billion subscriptions. We've got over 1.5 billion 5G connections of the 5 billion mobile subscribers, but we do need space to grow. We believe that 5G can contribute just under $1 trillion to global GDP by 2030, and that's great news. But the bad news is that if we don't do something on radio spectrum, we can lose 40% of that value. We need the space to build our networks in, and that's why a spectrum comes in. Thank you very much. So I think I can turn to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, if we look at these two charts, that 40% loss is what we're trying to avoid, and there is an opportunity to do that this year. This year is the end of the 4-year cycle in which we culminate in the spectrum world with a month-long UN conference called the World Radio Communication Conference. Happens every 4 years. It discusses spectrum for a lot of different services. One of them is mobile. And one of the things that we'll be talking about is planning 5G, not for next year, but for the next 10 years. We think a long way in the future at WRCs, and that's what we're going to be doing in Dubai in November. WRC brings together everybody from the connectivity industry. I like to say it's the COP of the airwaves. And in fact, this year, you're able to do COP28 in Dubai in November and just walk across the city and have WRC in December in Dubai as well. So we'll be making sure that there's enough spectrum for 5G at that conference. And there is 3 critical things that we will be trying to cover as a result of this year's WRC. 3 crucial bands that we need to deliver 5G. Firstly, it's talking about low band. The lower frequency spectrum is, the further it propagates. This means that low band spectrum is good for covering rural areas. That means that it provides digital equality between the urban areas and the rural areas. Without low band spectrum, we can't match the same speeds that we offer in cities to the rural people in rural areas, and that's crucial. Nobody wants to give one set of communication services to one people dependent on where they live and then not give them to other people. Digital equality needs low band spectrum. And then mid-bands, and there's two things we want to say about this. Mid-bands are the real muscle behind 5G. They're the medium-high capacity bands. They provide nearly all the launch spectrum for 5G in urban areas where there's lots and lots of pressure on cell sites. We need lots of mid-band spectrum, and I'll go into that in more detail. The first band that we need to agree on in WRC this year is the 3.5 gigahertz band. The second is the 6 gigahertz band. 3.5 is needed for 5G launch. 6 gigahertz is needed for 5G expansion. So I'll start talking about low bands and go into a little bit more detail about some of the things that we require for good 5G. Again, talking about rural connectivity, rural economic growth. More broadband means more productivity and creating that digital equality between rural and urban areas. Yes, right. So this graph here shows the direct link between spectrum and download speeds. So spectrum capacity and download speeds are intrinsically linked. The amount of throughput we can get is linked to how many megahertz of spectrum we get. And right now, typically in countries in this area, you have 900 megahertz, you have 800 megahertz, you may have 700 megahertz. Okay? Adding 600 megahertz this year will mean that we're increasing rural speeds by 35%. getting them much closer to the speeds that are being delivered in urban areas. And the economic benefits of that are fairly clear. For those of you that can get access to these slides afterwards, I've linked to lots of GSMA reports here. But we expect low bands to have a big impact on economies, including on its offering of rural connectivity for IoT. We heard a lot about agri-tech yesterday. There's a lot of applications that will rely on low-band connectivity for wide open areas. And it's really only low-band that can provide that kind of solution to these wide areas. You can't have any kind of wide area Wi-Fi or anything like that. These are low-band solutions needing low-band 5G to provide them. Now, the trouble we always have, and I'm sure we may hear from my friend Edmund later on about this, is that spectrum is a valuable resource. It's a scarce resource, and there's scarcely ever a band that's not being used. So regulators all over the world have tough decisions when they need to repurpose spectrum from one task to another. At the moment, the low-band spectrum that we're discussing and for this WRC is being used by DTT Broadcasting, which is a very, very important service. But there's a few things I want to show you today, that we can have low-band 5G and we can have DTT as well. And one of the aspects is this: the socio-economic benefit of giving just a 600 megahertz band, allowing still over 150 megahertz to broadcasting, has a clear economic benefit. That's because it brings together higher productivity and manages to create a lot of policy goals in the rural areas we're talking about. So spectrum utilization, and this includes Ghana information on this. We did a study on a number of countries in sub-Saharan Africa and looked at how much low-band spectrum you need for the current digital terrestrial TV offerings. And I think you can look at this in two ways. Ghana comes top. You're using the highest amount of this band for DTT, the most broadcasting. So that's great. It means you've got a really productive broadcasting sector. But it still leaves enough space for us to move into 600 megahertz. There's DTT and there's mobile. And it can be a win-win. You can have your TV and you can have the new streaming services that 5G offers as well. Thank you. So we look at this in different ways, but it's clear to me that there is capacity in Ghana to move towards the 600 megahertz band without harming current services. And the reasons to do that are fairly clear. We see 5G network population coverage goes up with more low-band spectrum. More people will get access to 5G. And what's more, in the next slide, 5G availability goes up as well. So the amount of times that you can access 5G on your phone. These are all linked to low-band spectrum, and these are the reasons why we should support that this year at the World Radio Communication Conference. I think we both clicked on there. Thank you. So moving on to mid-bands, the GSMA our research shows that we need 2 gigahertz of mid-band spectrum. We don't really mind where that comes from. We're fairly agnostic. Mid-bands tend to, the common description is what you see above you, 1 to 7 gigahertz. And where that comes from, our 2 gigahertz, we don't mind too much, as long as it's harmonized, as long as the equipment's there. But we need the 2 gigahertz by 2030, or maybe a bit later in some countries in this region, as 5G starts to saturate the market, probably in the early 2030s in this part of the world. So we can do that in various ways, and this chart here shows you the various ways you can chop up mid-band spectrum to provide your 2 gigahertz. The important thing is that we reach that target. And this isn't to get the sort of sci-fi speeds that Ernest mentioned earlier. This is to provide consistent 100 megabit per second download, 50 megabit per second upload in urban areas when at peak cell capacity. In the busy times, we're providing those consistent speeds so that people can build their applications against a consistent level of service, which is critical to 5G. So that level, that 2 gigahertz figure is fairly universal throughout the world. Again, we've got a report on that I can help you find that goes into detail with 40 different cities all over the world that are typical of cities globally, bringing us to that 2 gigahertz figure. The first mid-band I want to talk about in a bit more detail is the 5G launch band, 3.5 gigahertz. This is the biggest ecosystem for 5G products. Consistently, since 5G launches, about 80% of the launches have been in 3.5 gigahertz, which makes it the most affordable band with the richest ecosystem. Again, you see here the red boxes are the 3.5 gigahertz bands. This is by far the biggest device ecosystem that we have for 5G at the moment, which is why the vast majority of operators have used this band. But the problem is we're lagging at in international agreements. So this slide shows the internationally agreed 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, which is quite small amounts, and the world has gone significantly past this amount. Thank you. Since we've come to these agreements, the World Radio Communication Conference this year is an opportunity to rectify that, to make sure that we harmonize. We've seen some of the regional groups like Europe or the Arab group have already made agreements to have much wider 3.5 gigahertz allotments. This hasn't happened in Africa yet, although we are moving closer. There was an agreement in one of the African groups as part of the African Telecommunications Union a few weeks ago to support this band for 5G, and we hope this will be a conclusion in the World Radio Communication Conference later this year. Thank you. So finally, 6 gigahertz, and I'm conscious of time, so I'll try and move through these fairly quickly. 6 gigahertz is a new band. There isn't equipment for it yet. It's not going to be ready tomorrow. It is going to be ready in about 3 years' time. We're planning for the future by assigning this band for 5G use at World Radio Communication Conference this year. 6 gigahertz is going to be a huge driver of that 2 gigahertz of capacity. There's about 700 megahertz of spectrum there to use. And we'll be able to provide consistent user experiences, which will mean that we can use it for the industrial applications of 5G, providing Industry 4.0 applications, making sure that the hyper-consistent speeds are available at all time. And looking at the way that mid-band's being used, again, there are competitors. So we've carried out a cost-benefit analysis here as well between the potential use of it by 5G, and there's also talk of use by Wi-Fi as well. The trouble with thinking about using this band for Wi-Fi is that you need to have really, really good fiber to justify a big tranche of Wi-Fi spectrum. So Wi-Fi is just generally, pretty much all over the world, got a new tranche of 500 megahertz of spectrum, which has only just been released to them, which is easily sufficient for the vast majority of countries. And as you can see here, for the Ghana situation, the fiber optic network does not justify more than this brand new chunk of 500 megahertz. And in all cases, the cost-benefit analysis shows giving this spectrum to mobile rather than RLAN is the best option for the Ghanaian economy. In terms of operator demand, we did a survey recently of the industry to see how ready we are to use this brand new band. And the answer is we're not far off. The operators in the most developed 5G markets want it pretty soon. In Asia, I think we're going to see this coming online probably in 3 to 4 years' time. In Europe, probably 5 or 6 years' time, and probably in Africa at the start of the 2030s. By that stage, by the 2030s, there will be equipment built at scale, allowing for affordability to be driven into these 6 gigahertz networks. So we'll be ready, and in typical time, Africa will be able to benefit from the economies of scale that have been realized by other countries. And what a brilliant idea, getting a bunch of German tech enthusiasts to pay for the expensive equipment, and you can get it much cheaper a couple of years later. Sorry, can we go back one on the slides, please? So yeah, so I've showed you some of the things that mobile needs. and some of the benefits of doing that from a technology basis, from a GDP growth basis, from a economic benefit basis. But getting spectrum right also impacts the environment. We're all committed to the race to net zero, and the GSMA and the telecom sector in general is highly committed to this goal. Spectrum management comes into this. And we've just done a study on this, but in many ways it's pretty obvious. Every mobile base station uses carbon, emits carbon. It emits carbon to run it, it emits carbon to make it. So there is a carbon impact of every base station that we have. So minimizing the number of base stations in mobile networks is critical. And trying to make sure that we can run our mobile networks with the lowest level of carbon is very, very important. The figures you can see on your screen now is the amount of carbon impact that we get by reducing spectrum for mobile by 100 megahertz. So that's just 100 megahertz. We're trying to get to 2 gigahertz, a very small amount. And the equivalent in terms of the mobile network is like 1 million passengers flying to New York. But because of the enabling effect of the mobile sector, so mobile networks emit carbon, but conversely, we enable the reduction of carbon through the services we offer. We stop people going to the bank in their car. We stop people going to meetings the whole time, etc. We might stop people flying to meetings. We have people online here, for example. So mobile is an enabler. And the impact of taking away that 100 megahertz on the enabling effect, the loss of speed, the loss of quality, the loss of affordability is far higher. 10 million passengers. In fact, it's not. It's like 30 million passengers flying from London to New York. That's just 100 megahertz of spectrum. So the way we manage spectrum impacts more than economies, impacts more than technology. It impacts the planet as well. Thank you. So to wrap up, a couple of things. Firstly, a reminder, we need spectrum in low bands for digital equality. We need 3.5 gigahertz for harmonization for your 5G launches. These will all be 3.5 gigahertz. And then for that expansion, when we start offering FWA, industrial internet, industry 4.0 type connectivity. And the reason for that is fairly clear. Now, when you look at this graph, this is how low-band and mid-band spectrum will impact economic growth as a percentage of GDP. And you'll see, you might think, okay, Africa's doing much the same as everyone else. What's the big deal here? But it's not. Our data at the GSMA only goes up to 2030. And this, in all probability, is going to be mid-5G for the vast majority of countries, even early 5G. So you're catching up in terms of economic productivity with all the high-income countries in the first few years of 5G. As we go into the 2030s, this is going to be a great advantage for Africa in terms of lowering the economic gap between some of the countries. So the reasons for spectrum management and the reasons for assignment to mobile at this WRC are extremely clear. At the GSMA, we have a vision for WRC this year. I'll just take you on to the last slide. Thank you. It's just a picture, but to close. At the GSMA, we have a vision for 5G, and that's a vision that brings everybody in the world together on a journey to a more prosperous future. We believe that we shouldn't be leaving anybody behind. We don't want to just make rich people richer. We want to create equality, economic equality, gender equality, digital equality, and then bring together everybody on that journey. So we believe that if we get decisions right, we can get mobile into the hands of more people so they can use more services to enhance productivity. And in doing so at the GSMA, we believe this World Radio Communication Conference this year can be used for the benefit of billions. Thank you very much.
No.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So thanks to Ross for the brief presentation. I think the next step, we're going to have a conversation about how this is going to roll out in Ghana, what the impact of it is going to be on our people, on our network operators, on us. We're going to invite, is it going to be? Yes, we're going to invite Reverend Fianco to join us.
You got a good...
Thank you. I'm still here with my book, so don't fear. And we have a few questions. I think we'd like to hear from Reverend. I have a few questions here, but I'll also come to the crowd at some point, to the audience, to hear what if you have any questions for us as well. So I'll start it off, because I have some really, especially from my regulator. So let's lowball.
Just remember we'll meet again.
I know. I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to be very, very, very careful. So let's start with a low impact question. So engineer, tell me, do you think we Ghanaians, Ghana, we are ready for this revolution, this introduction of 5G into our ecosystem?
Are we ready? Okay, so let me start also from, I think the key bottleneck we have now is maybe making spectrum available to industry. We're in 2023. It was in 2020 that we had a plan. So the frequency plan for 5G is clear. There is no concerns about it. So we have a plan for the low band, for the mid band, and for the high band. So you would recall that we already planned our DTT migration to free up the 700. So that has been free. 3.5, we undertook a process to migrate, let me say, those who were not using the band as efficiently as 5G would. We've already, so we stopped renewing their licenses, and we gave them only 1 year authorization, so that it gives them time to plan alternative bands in which to move. 26 gigahertz band has also is available. So as we speak, all the bands are available. So why haven't we put it forward? And those are policy considerations.
I was waiting for that word. It's a common word you hear from the regulator. Policy. Please explain to us.
Okay, so most critical is the dynamics in our marketplace. So we saw with the modalities we use to give our spectrum for 4G, allowed only one operator could at the time, because the concern from industry was that the spectrum was overpriced. And one operator took the risk, actually, that, well, even though it cost more than I think it should be, they were willing to take the gamble, and they did. And we began to see a significant widening of the gap, especially in the data market, when that operator, I'm resisting the temptation of mentioning anybody's name. So when that operator launched 4G, and because there were those, even other operators who felt that the market wasn't ready at the time, and that is why they weren't willing to put up, the investment for the spectrum. But it didn't take long before others also realized that, look, in our in our market here in Ghana, if you make the service available, people will use it. So today it might appear that the devices, because that's also the other side. So on the supply side, spectrum is available, networks are built, and then you expect that consumers will have devices with which to be able to access the service. But what we have found in our market over the years since the inception of 2G is that once the service becomes available, people begin to acquire the devices. I recall when we made it mandatory for MNOs to have presence in at least in all the 10 regions, and even in the district capitals. There were some MNOs at the time who didn't think that some places were viable. But to those who, because of the incentive the regulator gave, decided to go there, found that in no time people were actually using the network, because there will be somebody in Accra who has somebody up there, and for their own convenience would buy a device and send to them. So yes, today we don't have many 5G enabled devices in the market, but the history tells me that if the service becomes available. But the policy concern is that we have one dominant player in the market who, if we use the same model we used before to make the spectrum available, they may be the only ones to be able to acquire the spectrum, and that would lead to a further widening of the gap. So the policy consideration now is how do we make the spectrum available in a way that allows other operators, without as strong muscles as the dominant player, to be able to all take off at the same time. So once those concerns considerations are concluded, a spectrum for 5G will be available to the market.
Fantastic. I'll come back to you on the question of cost, but I want to go to Ross for a second. You talked about the carbon impact. I know that the WRC 23 is going to do is doing some stuff in the area of what we're seeing to climate change. Mm-hmm. Can you delve a little, because it's not really a conversation that started in Ghana about climate change and how our industry can support that kind of change?
Yeah, of course. This isn't so much on the agenda of the World Radio Communication Conference directly, but it is one of the things that WRC can control. Because there's two aspects that we need to look at in terms of connectivity and carbon emissions. The first is our own carbon emissions in our own networks. How can we lower carbon in our networks? And there's a few things that we rely on for that. Obviously the electricity mix that we're getting from the electricity grid is critical, but a lot of the time in many parts of the world we're seeing operators find green solutions to their base stations, etc., solar panels, what have you. And that's one aspect. The second aspect, and this is where WRC really comes in, is in making sure that there is sufficient spectrum to ensure that the network is as efficient as possible, that we don't have too many base stations, or we don't have really thin channels. Thin spectrum channels can mean we need use spectrum inefficiently. It means we have to aggregate carriers, which uses power, and it means we use more power on the devices as a result. So clean spectrum management, giving us our clean contiguous channels, 100 megahertz for mid-band 5G, will help that as well. But there's, of course, a wider debate about trying to make sure that 5G services and beyond are as fast and as efficient and as uninterrupted as possible, so that mobile can play its enabling effect. And as we saw, if you remember my slide, there was the green bars on the graph and the red bars. The green bars were way higher, like 10 times higher than the red bars. We can do a bit on our own networks, but it's the enabling effect of mobile that really creates a huge difference here. As I said, making sure that people don't fly to meetings, or that they don't drive to their bank, or whatever. All these ways that mobile saves us from investing in a carbon-heavy journey can help lower overall carbon emissions.
Fantastic. Is there a possibility that you can't find any additional 5G spectrum?
Is there a possibility that we won't?
You won't find anything.
You'll have to ask Edmund. Listen.
Yeah, he says you have to ask me because at WRC, it says the countries that make the decision. So GSMA and others, they advocate, but then the decision is made by countries like Ghana. And the way it works is that the key benefits of this conference, and especially for us in our part of the world, is what he mentioned: harmonization. Because whenever or majority of countries, or all of us, where we have a global allocation of spectrum, what it does is that it creates a critical economies of scale, which allows equipment both on the network side and on the consumer side to significantly come down, because any manufacturer is not manufacturing just for a small market. They are manufacturing for, say, the whole world. So, and for our parts of the world where, let me say, disposable income is a challenge for a number of people, anything that drives down cost is something that we should support. So we look forward to supporting anything that would be to the benefit of our people. Only that as countries, we don't support only a single sector of the industry. Like on the low band, we are talking here about the interest of broadcasting companies and the interest of mobile companies. So he makes a very strong argument for mobile. We also have a thriving broadcasting sector, which is also significantly terrestrial. We have a number of stations that are on satellite that also want to be on terrestrial, because our markets have been predominantly terrestrial. So in the 700, so we took we were supporters, especially from Africa, in the WRC 12, okay, for the 700 band allocation. In fact, Africa made a strong push at the conference. But then we say, okay, we've done quite a bit. We've done 2 dividends. We want to slow it down. We are not saying we're not going to look at this again, but then it's been a costly migration. And there are also more efficient methods of broadcasting that would reduce the spectrum need, but then it means also replacement of the devices. So we're going to allow this to be market-led rather than the earlier changes that were policy-driven, that we must change. But now we're going to allow, because right now we are doing MPEG-4 encoding, okay, but there are more efficient encoding techniques that can significantly reduce the bit rate requirement for TV stations. But then those are not already in the existing TVs and decoders. So we need to allow time, because, like I mentioned, disposable income is a challenge where we are. So yeah, we are not opposed to freeing up more spectrum, but it's about a time horizon. So Ross and his colleagues have a more aggressive plan than we would like to pursue. And I think that is where, let me say, the disagreement is. So we are not conceptually opposed, but we differ in terms of how aggressively. So as much as they would want to reach a decision on, maybe additional spectrum in the 700 at WRC 23, most parts of Africa think that we should take our time in doing this. 3.5, I think that we are aligned. There isn't much resistance from our region. In the 6 gigahertz, yes, on the lower 6, I think Africa already made a decision that we're going to allow Ireland to have the lower 6. I think this week I got some contacts from Parliament. They want to bring in some Wi-Fi radios, and they are asking us, can they bring ones that support Wi-Fi in the 6 gigahertz? Yeah, so, and there are many use cases for that also, as much as, so you have the mobile connectivity, but then also you need, so we are planning to authorize the lower 6 gig for low power, or very low power Wi-Fi. But then the upper 6 gig is up for, and we are hoping that decisions will be made at the conference for the upper 6 gigahertz. We haven't made a decision as a country. We'll go to CPM, we'll come back, and we'll have an engagement with all of you. There will be a national preparatory meeting where we'll bring all of you different stakeholders together sometime in May, and to be able to agree, because we represent, with a decision is one that is supposed to represent the country. So we'll bring all of you around the table, and hopefully we will take a position that would be in the greater good of the country.
Amen to that.
Can I just mention, I was being a bit light-hearted when I passed on that question, but yeah, in answer to your question, as you've heard, regulators, WRCs are, about regulators making decisions when they have a lot of their children, asking them to be the favourite one, and have to make decisions, based on these things, and it's extremely hard. In reality, yeah, I think it's very, very unlikely. There's not going to be new mobile spectrum this WRC. Obviously, in Ghana, you have your own things that you like and don't like, and other countries will have different bands. There will be some spectrum, new spectrum, I think in nearly all countries. What the consensus will be on exactly how many people support some of the bands I spoke about earlier and which bands they are will vary a little bit. As you said, I think 3.5 gigahertz will be harmonized everywhere in the Americas and in EMEA probably, and I think we're nearly there. Already 6 months out, which is quite rare. The other bands, we've still got some discussion to have, but they'll have their supporters differently in different regions.
Happiness all around. So we're quickly running. I think I have about 7 minutes. I have two really nasty questions for my regulator. I will allow for others to ask questions before I completely impale him. Are there any questions from the crowd?
Thank you, and I really enjoyed the presentation and then the feedback from the regulator. I just have a question around service itself.
Service?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm a Ghanaian, tax-paying. I don't know, all I want is that I can make phone calls that are at a certain quality. Connectivity is good, and I'm enjoying the services that comes with that. Is there a reason for me to have diminished expectations because you want to have equity in terms of spectrum and all of that? I'm a Ghanaian. I wouldn't care too much about who gets what.
Okay.
I just want service quality. Why should I have to pay that price?
Okay.
Thank you.
Or do we wait or we?
Oh, please go.
Okay, so yes, you are right. You may not care now, but we always have to look at the bigger picture. So the reason why NS will not agree with what you said. Let me say that. but Salam will agree with you. So, and Ross gave a very good analogy that, the regulator is the parent with many children, and you have to balance things in everybody's favor. So, what you want to avoid in the market is to avoid a monopoly situation. We have been there before in the days of Ghana Telecom, where we saw how competition held us, okay, with expansion, even with service quality, etc. Now, what happens is that if we don't put in measures so one thing I must clarify is that when we declared MTN a significant market power and put certain measures on them, the objective is not to say punish them or slow them down. That is not the object. The objective is to create room for the others to also survive. Okay, that is the objective. So you have somebody who has done so well when maybe others were eating fufu and banku, they were going to the gym. Okay, and then now they've built up so much muscles. You see that if today, we haven't said they've done anything wrong, but if today they decide that they want to bully the others, they can. They have the muscles to be able to do that. But we haven't said they have abused it, but they have the capacity to. So what you decide to do now is to now begin to watch them more closely, put a few constraints on them, just so that you avoid a situation where they wake up one day and say, I'm going to flex my muscles. So that is what we are doing. And we are balancing this also with not stifling innovations. There are some complaints that come to us from other operators that we do not accede to, because it's a balancing act, what we are trying to do, and it's not a perfect balance, but we are just trying to ensure that, okay, so the big boy is able to carry on with his business. And in fact, since the declaration, they have grown even more. Market share, revenue share.
2.5% more. Specifically.
But for the consumer, who is also a key stakeholder, our interest is also to ensure that you have what you have. But then should we have, if we don't put in the measures we are putting in, and eventually everybody dies, and we are left with only a single operator, the risk is that now you are at the mercy of that single operator. And just like you have ECG or Ghana Water, maybe MTN is more efficient than these. But then now it is like you don't have an alternative. And if you don't have an alternative, it's a bigger risk than having us putting in the measures we are trying to put in to at least ensure that there is always an alternative for the consumer. So that is why we are doing what we are doing.
I think there's a question over there.
Thank you. Reverend.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for you. Technology neutral spectrum licensing. Is it going to happen soon? And will it help some of the other competitors come up? Or will it help in our new 5G spectrum allocation? Thank you.
Please, I've been asking that question since 2020.
Okay, so it was even one of the remedial measures that were announced, and we served the notice to all the operators, and everybody, was aligned. The industry wanted it, but there has been some policy considerations.
I said it, right? Policy.
So there has been some policy considerations, and we are waiting a decision from the policymaker, whom you should have invited, Ken. Exactly. So I can't tell you when, but I'm also hopeful it will be soon. Yeah, I don't think it's something that we can avoid doing. It's a necessary action that the authority has to take. And like I mentioned, once the policy clarity comes in, we would swiftly authorize tech neutrality. And yes, it will have an impact on 5G rollout, because there are different scenarios for 5G rollouts. Not all of it is going to be greenfield. So 4G will continue to run, and that is why, if even cost-wise, it is less costly to have 5G run alongside the 4G. So it's something that we hope we can roll out very soon.
Ross?
Thanks. Yeah, I just thought I'd make one additional comment to that. Obviously, I think everyone knows the GSMA's position on technology neutrality, and we've probably written more about that than some people write during their PhDs. But just one aspect and no pressure, Reverend, but one aspect, since we were talking about carbon emissions earlier, to think about is that each generation of mobile technology is very significantly more energy efficient than the previous one. So 2G to 3G is 10 times, 3G to 4G is 30 times more energy efficient. And so technology neutrality has a huge impact on carbon emissions as well. It's another thing, another benefit that you're going to bring when you make that excellent decision, I'm sure, at some point.
All right, so take the last question from Sakib and then.
Yeah. Hi, my question is around Starlink. I wonder how that plays into our planning.
Elon Musk?
Okay. Yes. Okay, so that is satellite services. So they've made contact with the regulator. As of now, even yesterday, one of my colleagues who was in Nigeria had engagements with the Nigerian regulator as to, the licenses they put in place. So in Nigeria, they have 3 distinct licenses. We also have some requirements. As of now, OneWeb has F-Station Gateway here in Ghana. Starlink, when they eventually, obviously they'll go to Nigeria because of the size of the market, and they have already indicated that they have an interest in our market, but no formal application has been received. So only when they formally make an application that we would consider. I think that ultimately there is, I'm not aware that there is any policy concerns, but when the formal application comes in, is one of the things. Well, we are, like we have mentioned, we are open-minded to anything that helps, our people. So whether it's more, we are not fetish about the particular platform, whether it's a terrestrial, it's mobile, it's fixed, it's satellite. We are open to all the technologies and platforms as long as they deliver, reliable services to the people. Yeah. So when Starlink eventually applies to Ghana, you would hear about it.
Great. Before you cut me off, I have a nasty question, but I'm kind of going to sort of. So it's the first part of the question is really to Ross, right? So you have a global view of how 5G has affected societies and communities in terms of cost. One of the things that really is pertinent to Ghanaians is the cost of services, and we keep hearing that mobility is quite expensive here. Can you relate to us some of your experiences in 5G rollouts in some of the other areas of this world and how that has affected cost of delivery of that service and subscribers?
Yeah, sure. Driving affordability is critical. Obviously, in this part of the world, it's super critical, and we need to make sure that we deliver 5G as affordably as possible. Otherwise, people can't take that up. In the GSMA, we do a lot of work studying the usage gap, and I believe, but I wasn't here, that my colleague talked about the usage gap earlier. Very briefly, that is the number of people in any country who are living within the coverage of a mobile network, but nevertheless don't use it. Yeah. So people who can't afford a device, can't afford the service, have lower levels of digital literacy, etc. And that's very high in Ghana. Coverage here is excellent, usage gap is high. And there's a number of drivers for this usage gap, but affordability is certainly one. So, rule number one is the word that the Reverend and I have both spoken about today, which is harmonization. So we need to make sure that spectrum is harmonized and standards are harmonized, and these two come together. We need to make sure that devices can work and be made in as many markets as possible to realize as high economies of scale as possible. That's why 3.5 gigahertz, I've told lots of non-spectrum managers about a lot today, is really important because literally everybody's using 3.5 gigahertz. That's where the most affordable 5G devices are and the biggest range of devices as well. So that would be number one. Clear roadmaps for spectrum, really important. Operators need to know as far into the future as possible when they're going to get stuff and how much they're going to get. Really important. That helps them plan their networks, not put up unnecessary base stations. And again, sorry about the broken record, but there are many, many advantages of minimizing the number of base stations in your network. Affordability being one, carbon being another, etc. And that's really important as well. And making sure channel bandwidth is big enough. So making sure that we can provide enough capacity to optimize 5G speeds, and that means for mid-bands, 100 megahertz channels. It means low bands. There's not enough low bands to go round, so as much as we can get.
Fantastic. The second part of the question goes to Edmund, affordability, Reverend. And the affordability part of it, some people don't know how much, we hear this talk about high cost of data in Ghana, right? Just to throw around some numbers. So, for instance, to run a 2G network in Ghana, your license will cost you upwards of $25 million. To run a 3G would cost you, 28 million, and a 4G is around about $30 million. So the question to you now is, if 5G should become available, because ultimately these costs are going to trickle down towards the customer.
You mean cost of spectrum?
Well, it's factored in. The cost of spectrum, how much I pay in my regulatory, all of that is factored in. But spectrum is by far the biggest cost I have to, as a network, I have to take and run with for the next 15 years, hoping that I will make back that money. So what are we looking at in terms of cost for 5G? How much are we expected to pay for it, looking down the line?
Okay,
Or it's a policy decision?
Yeah. so yes, it is a policy decision in that. So the spectrum, we are managers of the spectrum on behalf of the state. And it is the state that decides. In fact, that revenue doesn't come to the NCA, it goes to the National Treasury. And so the managers of the National Treasury, they decide. For example, if you decide that, okay, because it's all policy objectives that you have to balance. So sometimes the Minister of Communication says, look, I want to, can you lower your revenue expectations so that I can drive growth? Eventually, the impact will affect the economy and you will get your money back. And then the Minister of Finance looks into his, sees the hole he has to fill and says, look, I need the cash now. So it's always, and that's a discussion that we are not even part of. Right. You understand? So we implement policy, and when it comes to these things that we do on behalf of the state, if the state says, okay, look, let's give it to the highest bidder, so be it. It means that we are maximizing revenue. Yeah. Over there will always be other objectives, but that becomes the prime. Policy could decide that, look, we would make revenue number 3 in the order of priority, and then put other objectives first. What it does is that it has an impact on the mechanism we will adopt, which also has an impact on how much people will be made to pay for it, or even how they are made to pay for it. Because after agreeing on price, if we require you to pay upfront, it has a certain impact. So all those things, like I mentioned, are decisions for policy. Our duty by law is to advise. But an advice is an advice.
I wish I had started off by saying anytime you say policy, you owe everybody here 100 Ghana cedis. So that brings us to the end of this discussion. Thank you to Reverend Fianco and Ross Bateman for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Ernest, Ross, and Reverend. Okay. I think we can take a picture.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. All right.
Let's do a picture. Let's do one picture quickly. Right. So all too soon, we're about to draw the curtain to this beautiful conference that we've had for 2 days. But you want to wait for this last session. In fact, I have been looking forward to this very final session. It's dubbed the power closing session. So please, don't be in a rush to leave. To be moderated by the CEO of the Ghana Chamber of Telecommunications himself, Dr. Engineer Kenneth Ashigbe. Thank you so much. And another round of applause for them as they take their seats. Right. So we'll take some music from the cultural troupe as we set up the stage for the next session. Right. much. Thank you. Hey, sir. Hey. Thank you so much. Thank you. A round of applause for them. A round of applause for them. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Nice one. Hey. All right. All right. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we give them a round of applause? Yeah. Once again, a very, very, very big thank you to all those of you who have managed to sit with us till this time. Shall we welcome Dr. Engineer Kenneth Ashigbe to introduce his panel? A round of applause for him as he joins us here.
Thank you very much. And so, William chose the easier one and decided that I should do the one when all of us have been sitting here for 2 days. But a big round of applause to all of us, for great job that we've done. So I'd invite my 3 panelists to join me here. Fortunately, I have Estelle and so there's a lady, and then I have 2 gentlemen, Estelle, Ellie, and Chris. Please join me. If there was time, I would have done something with that dance that Selim would not have been able to do. Right. So, thank you very much, and thank you, Chris, Estelle, and Ellie, for agreeing to join this panel. So really, today, we are not going to do a panel discussion. We're really going to have a conversation. Yesterday, the crystal ball ended looking at the technology side of things. It is said that, I was reading the Economic Intelligence Report about Africa, and they released this thing in February, and they're talking about the fact that Africa is likely to face a crisis. Are we likely to face a crisis, or we are in a crisis? The double whammy and the way it's hitting us is really hitting us. So what we want to do with this particular panel is to move a bit of the tech issues and look at it from a more of a leadership point of view, more of a personal point of view, to say, you and I, what are we leaving here hoping to, what kind of development are we hoping to push? So we want to be able to get inspiration from our panel. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start off asking them to introduce themselves, tell us a bit of what they do, the organizations they lead, and what they take from the challenges we face, the need for inspiration that we require. Because with all of these things that is happening, there are unicorns that are going to be born. But unfortunately, there are some big boys that are also going to die. So what do they think that we all should do? And it's more personal, it's more about your organization, so that when we are living here, what kind of inspiration can they give us? So that's what I want us to do. Very light, very easy, to make it worth your sitting down here. Right. So I would start off with my brother, who is now Oga, because he's moved from the chalet to Oga. I don't know whether they do chalet where you are. Okay, so Ellie, it will start off with you. Introduce yourself to us, and tell us what you take of what we're talking about, drawing from your experiences from Ghana and now Nigeria as well.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to everybody. I think, I'll start from my journey here. I spent over 10 years in this market, working with a good number of you I can see, trying to bring mobile money to the doorstep of every Ghanaian. When it started, people were asking, what is all this about? But today we all can tell that our efforts have paid off. And there's still work to be done, by the way, but at least we can pat ourselves and say
the efforts and the sleepless nights and all those journeys that we had to take, difficult decisions that we had to make, have paid off. And on the back of that, there was another responsibility and need to move across to Nigeria and go and do something similar. So MTN Mobile Money in Ghana, and then Momo Payment Service Bank in Nigeria is my new destination. Trying to, repeat the same things we've done here, but at a different level and looking at different challenges and things that you need to think about. So that's been my journey, and I had two things in mind when you said we should have this conversation. And one is current, an experience we had 2, 3, let's say a month plus now in Lagos, when the central bank decided that for several other reasons, and I know people have all the reasons for some of the actions that were taken, to do some redesigning of their currency. And so they took out the bigger, the 500, the 1,000 and 200, and redesigned and said that, well, that's what will become legal, tender. And everybody must go that route, and also try to, take all the old notes, and in the process created cash scarcity, and leading up to the elections. And when people also felt that part of the reason was to, reduce as much as possible the incidence of vote buying and all that. Now, what came out clearly was that digital platforms needed to rise up to the challenge, and we failed miserably. We failed the people, even those who just needed to get by couldn't, because there was no cash, and people moved back to barter trading, which for me was a big disappointment. People were trying to exchange their, maybe if you have yam, I'll give you my corn or something, and it was because we were not ready. We were not ready for what was required, to drive the digital journey. The banks were failing. The transactions were, you could do a transaction. In fact, I had an experience where I did a transaction. It didn't go through several times. I got debited, and it took me almost a month to get a refund. So the question I ask is, this is not for poor people, because how will they survive if they don't have access to their money and they have to? So the question then is, why were the service providers not ready? Why were the banks in particular, who were expected to do a lot more? Because most people had ATM cards, or they had bank cards, but they couldn't use it because the transactions keep failing. Were not dimensioned enough at that point, because would have been a big windfall, where a lot of people would have easily been transitioned onto the digital platform. So that's just an experience I thought is worth thinking through and asking ourselves, are we ready for that time when we get to the point where everybody is coming on board, but we are not ready, and people go back to
their
cash
old ways,
because the trust they had built in the technology failed. So that's just something I want. There's a second one, but I think it allows for the others to speak. I'm very mindful of time. Thank you.
Correct. So Estelle.
Yeah.
So what so tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, the markets that you're working in,
right.
and so from your personal point of view, with all the challenges we have, what do you want us to focus on and think about? Ellie's asked us to look at agility so far as we're concerned, and readiness when the challenges arise, as leaders, as businesses, as industry. So what would yours be?
Yeah. So, my name is Estelle Akofio-Soa, and I currently work for an organization called C2 that was born out of Google. And I run our Ghana, Liberia, and Togo operations. We are an open access infrastructure provider that really looks to bridge the infrastructure gap that service providers face, looks to take away that CapEx burden on service providers and create a more equitable playing field, hopefully, for various service providers. I think that's something we've been dancing around as a conversation in the panel earlier on. You know, just listening to the conversation since I joined you today and the purpose of this panel, and as I've been trying to live and breathe through the last 3 months almost of this year, I think for each and every one of us around the world, but you know, we're focusing here on Ghana at the moment, this is really going to be a real test of our leadership and our the human side of us, and how to balance, just like Ellie was just saying, from the experience you just gave. I think it's so important that somehow we stay calm right now and actually look forward and think about what the future needs us. Because sometimes in the storm, you need to kind of pause, you need to regroup, you need to strengthen, you need to also slim down during challenging times. And I know we're asking our government to please slim down a little bit, because we're all doing that automatically to be smart. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's really important that we are thinking forward, that as we come out of this storm, how are we going to be ready for the opportunities that you see in difficult times? That's what becomes clear, is big challenges that we need to fix and we need to face. And even more important, how do we, and in my conspiracy theory moments, I really do think that the world is somewhat punishing Ghana for saying too loudly that we were embarking on a Ghana Beyond Aid campaign, that we were preparing ourselves to love ourselves, to use our own resources. And you know, Ghana has always been ahead of the curve. I know that sometimes we say that and probably internally question ahead of the curve, but we're not always ahead. But we always are ahead, you know. And I said to my investors the other day when they were saying, you know, why should we continue to invest in Ghana at this time? We are a unique country that does get a number of things right. We are ahead. I think even this economic crisis we're going through, it's our own economic COVID that we're going through, and we're doing it ahead of others. And I do think we need to acknowledge as well, even that we're managing to go through, and this is testimony to Ghanaians' resilience and our ability to pull together, although I think we could be pulling together better now, to just go through difficult times like this and come out stronger. So just to summarize, really important for me, I think, is sort of holding on to the foundation and our core right now, but thinking forward as we come out of this. How are we as businesses and individuals ready for the new world, you know, that we're stepping into?
Great. Interesting. So resilience really is important. I think we've demonstrated that.
Yep.
The Ghanaian, so our financial covered, you know, so we definitely need to get out of it better. Thanks, Estelle. So Chris, so we'll come to you. You are from the banking side, Group CIO. So please tell us a bit about what you do, and then what you want, what the message for you for us.
Okay, sure. Am I coming through? I
Yes.
couldn't hear myself. So thank you so much. First of all, I mean, it's an honor to be here. I'm a Zambian. It was my first time to be in Ghana. It's my first conference here in Ghana, and I have enjoyed, I think, what has been going on. I've been following through. So I'm the Group CIO for Fidelity Bank. Fidelity Bank is a Ghanaian wholly owned bank, but we do have subsidiaries in Asia and some here. Obviously, we are a bank, and right now, I think we're facing stiff competition from everybody. Banking, as you know, it has really changed. It's no longer, you know, where you wait for people to come and save you. Before I talk about the things that I would want to leave you with, before coming here, I was in Kenya. I was with Equity Bank. I was very happy to see the Kenyans yesterday when they were presenting. I was like, that's a Maina, that's my relative, you know, and so it's good to see that it's global, these discussions. Before that, I was with ABSA, so I do have quite a bit of experience when it comes to technology in the banking. Usually I'm the guy to blame when things are not working, and so it's that part of the job. But I think listening in today, you know, you would come in with the minds of, yeah, let's fix this, let's fix that and stuff. But I think there's a clear gap that we really need to solve, and that is, for me, for Africa. One, I think that there's been talk around devices, there's been talk about, connectivity. We're just from hearing the 5G. From where I sit, there are very basic things that, affect our customers. You could have this connectivity, but the quality of connectivity is an issue. And I think we need to probably think a bit more about going in and incentivizing some of these small-scale businesses. Businesses right now are there the business is there to create value for the owner. But if we look at it in terms of the long term, and there's a speaker here who was talking about the founding father for this nation, Kwame Nkrumah, when he made the road to Tema years back. People didn't see because the number of cars, were little. Maybe this is what we need to try and do and reap after so many years. Because if you look at what the telcos are doing, if you look at what the banks are doing, we're all chasing after the money. I was almost passing a comment when the Reverend said, there's one big telco now who's can afford to do all this. We don't know what to do with the rest. I almost said, let's give them loan, because that's what we know. But I think the issue is, how do we make it more sustainable? How do we look at potential and go invest in this potential and see that we're able to carry our people from the levels of poverty to certain areas? Interestingly for me, in Ghana, I was arguing with some women. They bring these sweet potatoes. Where I come from, sweet potato leaves are a delicacy. So I was like, where are the sweet potato leaves? And she was like, they didn't pack. I was like, who didn't pack? So it dawned on me that these are not produced here. Yeah. So I think for me, we also need to look at how do we create the money. The issue of saying we are all transacting, we've created, all these people are having devices, but if we can't create the money, we'll all be working within a limited space. So for me, I think the challenge I would like to leave is, what is it that we can do on the local scene to try and improve the local economy? Because I think from there, that is where banking and everything else becomes very meaningful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Great. So, okay. So, Chris, maybe I'll come back to you again. Sure. So with the current challenges that we've been faced with, and that's one of the things that we wanted to do with this panel, try and get cross-African, Pan-African, perspectives, so you would give us the Zambian, the Kenyan experiences and all of that, with all the challenges that are around. Yeah. How, from your perspective, how have you managed these challenges, and what should businesses do to be able to, as Estelle says, our financial COVID, be able to go over the financial COVID and be able to ensure that beyond that, there's life?
All right. Thanks. I think that's a good question. So for me, I see these patterns across Africa. I think the problems that we have in Zambia, that we have in Kenya, are replicated here. So it's very interesting because you can be here and Kumasi, and network is very fine and everything else. The moment you move out, everything crumbles. It's the same everywhere. So I think the challenge of infrastructure really needs to be dealt with. And if we wait for telcos and the big guys to go and, put up all these masts and everything else in these rural areas, it's not going to happen at the pace that would want this development to happen. So I think there has to be a deliberate plot to say, as banks, as telcos, and everyone else, how do we come together and fund this, looking at the future? Of course, we have issues around cybersecurity and frauds now. The SIM card issues are really rampant right now. In Kenya, it's even much worse because it even gets physical at some point. M-Pesa is quite big there. And, to be honest, the whole space of fintechs and what telcos are doing on the financial part has really put a strain on what the banks really should be doing. And I think when you look at the strategies, and I speak, I think for most banks, they are not sitting thinking about how do we do co-banking, how do we upgrade this. And the thinking is the customers that we had right now is multi-banked, right now is connected, right now has options, right now doesn't need to beg a bank for anything. How do we become relevant in this customer's life? So everybody is out there selling convenience. And I think if you look at banks, we're a bit rigid because either because we're over-regulated, I don't know, but it becomes very difficult to make changes. You see,
some of the things that were being discussed here. If I decide today to say I'm putting a service in the cloud, the number of submissions I need to make, justifications to do that. There was even an interesting one where they were asking to say, go and do a due diligence on Google. I don't know how you can do a due diligence on Google. But you see, those are the realities that you face. So at the end of the day, I think for me, it's more around how we partner together, because the customer that we're facing now, unfortunately, is not one we're having a generation that is coming up that don't believe in going to banks. They don't believe in waiting. They don't believe in all these fun excuses that they just want things done and they move on.
Yeah.
So as part of planning for the future, that is what we're thinking about in the banking space. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And I think the whole conversation about collaboration, the whole conversation about working together is something that we really need to do. So I'll come to you just so that to ask what are the potential threats and what are the potential opportunities that are out there? What do we also need to do together? You know, talking about what Chris was talking about, do together to be able to succeed in this new world that is unfolding.
Yeah. So I think one of our biggest challenges is trusting, you know, each other. And just listening to Chris there, and as he was talking about, you know, you leave Accra and then the connectivity is not as good, etc. And we've learned over time that government can't fix that problem. They're not the ones to do it. We know that it needs to be private sector driven, but it does need that enabling environment. So it needs the right policies, regulatory. I think we should stop using the word regulatory. We should name them enablers so they stop regulating us and they rather enable us to do what we're meant to do. But the trust, and I think as Ghanaians, I'm not sure that we're the best at trusting each other. And that's why we always say, you know, in Ghana, you don't tell someone your business idea because you think that they're going to steal it. So, you know, do we think that Salom and I could sit in a room with Patricia and actually agree to really share our infrastructure, open up our infrastructure, and enable all of us? You know, and I think that's where, again, with what we're facing, we need to come together as Ghanaians and say, we're going to solve this problem. We're going to keep this nation afloat and grow it. But I think that's a challenge for us as human beings. And, you know, during COVID, we did come together strongly as Ghanaians, looking at how we could help each other. And I feel like we're missing that this time, to come together as a nation and say, we're going to get through this. This is what we each need to do. And all of us feeling responsible, you know, to find solutions. So the needs are there. And again, as Chris was saying, you know, the customers have evolved, the need is there. But I really think that trust piece in the private sector to really come together, to work together, and I'm sure you face it running the chamber, you know, how do you bring all of us players? And we're all facing the similar challenges, you know, and I think we're also constrained because of the size of the market, and so we panic and think, well, if I really enable someone else, you know, is there enough business for me? But we have to solve ourselves. And I think being able to come together, remain calm, and know that, you know, if you're meant to be here, you're going to be here as a business. And if you collapse, it means you're not meant to be here, so off you go and do something else. So really coming together, trusting, but being committed to nation.
Yes.
Nation building, and realizing that we all have that responsibility. And it's a long-term thing. It's not short-term. And, you know, being willing to give off of our best, I think is really where we're challenged. And when with fear, you know, with what's happening, there's so much fear that, again, sometimes we're in a panic mode. And that's what I've been telling myself as a leader, you know, each day is how do I stay calm at the beginning of the day? And how do I give off a calm feeling to my team so that we get through this and we continue to create and innovate and not to feel constrained. And we are able to trust each other and partner and really solve the problems. I don't think the problems are unknown. I think we know what they are, and even the solutions. And for the last 2 days, we've been talking about technology and how that's a problem solver. So Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Estelle. And so this thing about Ghanaians learning to work together and realizing the fact that it's an ecosystem kind of mentality that we all need to be able to win really is critical for us. So Eli, I would want you to bring the last, that there was a second point you wanted to make. I would want you to bring that also up. But as you do that, one of the things I would also want you as a business leader, anytime I go to MWC, I come back excited. This time, as Akim is looking into my face, I came back really depressed, worried that if we're not too careful, digital technology that I thought we were going to use to leapfrog the developmental gap was rather going to be exacerbated. So what do you think that all of us, and this is all of us, can do to ensure that we are able to take advantage of this thing we call technology that has brought all of us here together to ensure that this gap does not leave us behind?
Okay, thank you, Ken. I think during Chris's submission, he mentioned, the whole concern about competition in the space. And Estelle has talked about trusting. Yeah. I think it was one of the things that, we had to deal with. And that is why, for instance, here, the mobile money journey took a while. Yep. I mean, banks were trying to restrict what was happening, and we all, lost momentum in terms of how fast we could have gone. But if you look at it today, everything else has happened. Yep. The banks are still growing. Yep. The question is, where was the concern? It was just because of the issue, trust. And also the ecosystem. Yep. The ecosystem is big. And, the pie is so big that if you just look within yourself, you don't see it. But if you collaborate and work together, because all the funds that have been able to, that has been mobbed by the mobile money players, has come back to the same institution, to the extent that at some point, some banks will collapse if those funds were taken away
from them.
And so the central bank has to intervene to say, look, you can't move these funds around the way you want. So it just comes back to that conversation. Then the other part is also on the enabling side. And Estelle talked about regulation being an enabler. And because of the level of, participation by the central bank in that conversation, we were able to move faster. And it's the same things you find in Nigeria. They are where we were a few years ago, still trying to go around that process. Today we have a fintech innovation in Bank of Ghana managing this with focus. So back to the second thing I wanted to talk about, and you talked about leadership, and I want to talk about courage. Courage for us to take certain bold decisions. I've been trying to ask this question several times. Why are our traders from here still struggling to pay for business with their counterparts in Nigeria? Why? Why are the central banks in these two countries not bringing their heads together and finding a common exchange that allows this trader to pay CD here and that person get Naira there, and we don't have to double in USD, which brings all the complexities? Why is it difficult? Why can't the central banks sit together and work? It's tough. It's not going to be easy. There are barriers that we have to break, but I think it's doable. And it's doable, and we get the full benefit of, regional trade being enhanced. And our traders will be better off because business will be simpler, and we'll get them to do a bit more than they are doing today with all the restrictions that they have. Today, the person has to still find dollar to go and buy someone stuff in Naira. So that's the second bit. We've done all the things about pubs and things, but we are still not getting there. And the question is why? Why are we not able to break that and make that regional, opportunity come to life? Because when we do that, then the technology part of it will come alive and we all benefit. So that's the second passionate conversation I've been trying to have with the, the central bank there here and see how, we can leverage that opportunity.
Right. So I think we're so well positioned to be able to do that. And for me, for MT4D, where we're talking about wanting to take one particular thing and say we did that, this might be something that we really need to look at to say, can we do that? Because we've been doing it. Bamialata has been in Ghana, way before I was born, and they've been doing their things together. So that courage to be able to do that. We have only 2 minutes. I don't know whether there's any question, because I was going to ask them all to give us in a sentence or two the last messages they want us to be leaving MT4D for. Anybody who has any question you want to ask or were tired, and so maybe I should just go back to them and let them give us their last sentences that we're going to leave off here with, and then I would do my last bit. Okay, Arnold had his hands up. So please be thinking of your last sentence that you want us to leave MT4D with.
So my question is actually just a message of hope to anyone, whether it's someone running a business that is going through like some difficult times, or people listening to us from the FinTech Association, anyone, just a message of hope.
Right. Okay, so that's going to be, that's basically what I would want your last sentences to be about. Inspiration and hope. So that, I don't know who wants to jump into that, but so that's what I would want to ask from all of you. But I just want to say, maybe from myself, to say that if you consider the fact that when COVID really was here, and we're looking at it, and all of us might have had people die close to us, really nobody thought we're going to get out of here. But today we're here. So definitely with all the challenges that we're facing, as Estelle has said, there's life beyond all of that. We need to stay calm, think a bit more, find what it is that we can do together to make it better for somebody else. And in the process, it will be better for you as well. That would be my message of hope. So I'll come back to the panel again and say, who want to jump in with that? Message of hope, inspiration to end MT4D.
I'll kick off. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so I'll just add, first of all, we do need to hold our government more accountable. And somehow, I don't know how, okay, but it's just like you were talking, what you just said. A lot of what we're facing right now economically is because of our tying ourselves to the dollar. And you just everyone in the central banks must know this. So why do we not solve it? There have been so many social media videos going around about, these are all conspiracy theory things, that, the developed world doesn't actually want us to solve these problems. And that we are here purely, they consider us here purely to serve their raw material needs and so on. And the likes of the World Bank and the UN and so on have structured us and advised us to continue to be in that space. So, and I actually think it's true. And so we're going to have to step up and solve ourselves. And we need our leaders. We're running our businesses as efficiently as we can. If I don't run my business well, the business I'm employed, I get let go of, And so people that can't do their job when they're running our countries need to go. There's some interviews of all the different candidates going around, and one of them, whose name luckily I can't remember, so, why do you think you should be the president of Ghana? Well, I think I should be the president of Ghana because it's my turn to be the flag bearer of whichever country. It's like they've just got it wrong, So we do need to solve our leadership at a government, and I don't have a solution, unfortunately. But so my words of encouragement is that tough is not impossible. Okay, so we're going through a tough time, but it is not impossible. We've been through tough times before. We've come through them strong, and I do believe that we are going to come out of this incredibly stronger and more resilient and more dependent on ourselves. So that's what I tell myself each morning. Estelle, tough is not impossible. You got through yesterday, even though when you woke up, you wondered how you would. And I'm sure there's going to be some gold nuggets that come through this year. And we'll look back in a year's time when we're here together. So yeah, tough is not impossible. We will get through this.
Right. Thank you. Right. So Chris,
yeah, let me go next so that he can come. Yeah. So I think there are tough times, and coming from the financial sector, it's really been something, especially around the debt exchange and the like. But I think there is hope. My view is, when I look at Africa and you look at most of the discussions that we've had here, there's an issue around the devices. When you look around us, you look at the number of minerals that we have as a continent, we are able to produce these things. We need to move to a stage where we start producing these end products instead of exporting it. Let's make it relevant in our markets. And Ghanaians, like Zambians, are very religious people. My own country, it's a Christian nation. So I believe, and I see every time in Parliament we're quoting scriptures and everything else. But God says that He will bless the work of your hands. The work of your hands is not in typing, how fast you type on that phone. It's in actually picking up something and doing it. So my word of encouragement is, whatever you're doing, it could be out of season now, but just remain consistent. There will be a breakthrough, and we will get through this as a country.
Amen.
Thanks. Ellie?
Yeah. On my part, I think two things. The good thing of all we are saying here is we have very good talent around here, very brilliant people who just need, the proper guidance, and they'll be able to do the big things that we see done elsewhere. But those big things didn't start big all of a sudden. They started small. And I mean, if you take the mobile money journey once again, it started small, but gradually, once we kept at it and we kept pushing and doing the right things, it became bigger and bigger. So the talent is there. Let's nurture them. And it doesn't have to be big on day one. So if it's not big for you now, it doesn't mean it will not be big tomorrow. You just need to keep at it and have belief in the strategy and just keep pushing. Along the way, you need support. So also look out for those supports. They'll be very important on the journey because you can't travel it alone. Pick up those supports, and I think the sky will be the limit. I think we have it here. We just need to be focused, and once again, we need to have courage that we can get there.
Courage. Yeah. So is courage the second one, because you said two? Talent.
I put the two together.
Yeah. Right, great.
Starting small, and the fact that we have talent.
Good. Okay. So please, a round of applause for my panel. And so all too soon, MT4D has come to an end. We're very grateful to all our sponsors who have made this happen. We're grateful to the GSMA who partnered us to do this year. And we're grateful to His Excellency, the Vice President, and the Honorable Minister for Communication and Digitalization that has helped us to make this happen. So next year we've fixed it. The event is in March next year. Is it the 19th and 20th? 19th and 20th. Tuesday, Wednesday of March 2024. God willing, we'll all be here very soon. I'm sure we'll be sharing the theme with you and would want to get your feedback on what we've done and how we can make sure that this happens. And my challenge to Ellie, Estelle, and also to Chris is, how do we make this first starting making a West African thing? So we'll reach out to the likes of Ellie and all of that to be able to bring in, West Africa into it. Estelle, definitely, with where your footprint is, to also be able to help us. Zambia they're almost like the Ghana of where they are. They're not too different. So we'll try and see how we'll be able to leverage on that. But definitely, we need to take this. And as Estelle said, the market is too small after it's here. So we'll try and make sure that next year, the West African presence is a lot more into this and would make it happen. So we're very grateful to all of you, our technical team, who have been with us to make sure that all of this happened, to the dance group and to our two hosts at the two various venues. Thank you all very much, and the prayer is that God richly bless us all. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so let's take a photo quickly. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I've been really, really informed. I think the session has been very, very informative. Don't you believe so? Right. And we want to, like Dr. Ken Ashigbe said, we'd like to say a very big thank you to all of you. Those of you that joined us yesterday and today, we really appreciate your time. We do not take it for granted at all.
So can we get, we're not too large
the number, but those who
Yeah,
stay.
good to connect
No, all
again.
of
Those
us
of us here, one big photo, one big photo. Everybody to the front, one big photo.
Can we take this one?
So please join us.
Now.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Oh, good. Who's Patricia, by the way?
Your niece. Thank you so much.
Stay. Yeah. Even as the photo goes on, I'd like to quickly acknowledge our sponsors one more time. Vodafone Cash, Huawei, ZPay, Ghana Limited, Mobile Money Limited, Stanbic Bank Limited, Airtel Tigo Money, People's Pensions Trust IT Consortium, Opportunity International Savings and Loans, B-Box Limited, Fidelity Bank, and our media partners Joy News, Graphic News Plus, and ABC News Live. Yeah. Nice one.
But due to the acidic content of the atmospheric weather condition in the economy, I have decided what will so be metal. I feel take away the two. I'm for watching metal 1 Ghana cedi for jollof rice, 1 cedi 20 pesos for gobe, 80 pesos for kenke, tamai, and the cow 1 cedi 50 pesos.
You know what? Just get me water.
For sachet water, 30 pesos. For bottled water, 50 pesos. Oh, Moka has a Vodafone cash. I'm the free. I'm free. Metal.
Transfer charges. Bida. Switch to Vodafone Cash today and enjoy 0 charges whenever you send money to all networks. Yes, sending money is free on Vodafone Cash. Only e-levy applies. Dial *110# to send money today.
Hey, and to fufu by this time.
People fall and they rise. Make you no worry about the things you know we change, the things you know we do today. You go do them tomorrow.
Ooh, wow, this girl's got talent. You too can change your world, and it's affordable with Airtel Tigo data bundles.
Make it a rhythm entire body. You be the winner, and I go tell you.
Airtel Tigo. Life is simple. What does money mean to you?
It means convenience. It gives me the ability to do business at my own pace.
It allows me to live my life with ease and enjoy my lifestyle without interruptions.
Security. I can make investments I can trust, and I know exactly where my money is all the time.
Having the flexibility to do what I want to.
The feeling and peace of mind I...
*715#
to buy airtime.
Dial *715#.
Send money to the workers.
Dial *715#.
Even the boys' night out.
Just dial *715# and get things done. You don't need data to bank with Stanbic. With Stanbic, imagine all the 1,001 ways you can bank without the internet. Or stressing me out.
And sit there.
Social distancing.
To register, visit stanbicbank.com.gh and click the service request button, or send a message on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Stanbic Bank GH. You can also call us on 0302 815 789.
This is the future mobile money, Huawei FinTech.
Araba, there are some people at the door. Go and tell them I have traveled to Russia.
Has traveled to Russia.
Your father has killed me. I sent him money from America to complete my house for me.
Are all student association contributions?
Even the money from the fundraiser for Kweku's surgery.
Oh! He too? Don't be a victim. If you're
I want to be spotted in town in a black Audi Q7.
SUV, Range Rover. Aja akokora na madanda me ho me ne me yere.
Old age comes to mind when I hear about pension.
Savings.
Enjoying the rest of your life while you wait for death, which is inevitable.
I would want to be on a farm, spending quality time with friends and family.
A lot of long walks, a lot of gymming.
At least I should have about 500,000 a month.
I don't know how much. I just want to have a lot of money when I retire.
Give or take $200,000 in my account.
Yes, I have a pension plan.
As that now, no.
No.
Yes, I have with SNIT.
What made me start a pension plan, I would say, is my employer.
Currently, no. We are now going to set up one. I've not thought of it now.
Leave no be pension.
It's actually the first time I'm hearing the statement.
Yeah, leave is not a pension. Holiday is not a pension. You definitely get back to work.
Really?
Wow.
I have no idea. 50 cedis a month?
I feel like my future is secured.
Yes, I do know there is a difference between all those.
In my line of work, actually, we get to work with all of these agencies or companies, so I do know.
It's very, very different.
I didn't know that I could use my pensions to apply for a loan.
Wow.
Yes, you can.
A portion of your pension, which is tier 3, if that is available by your employer.
I have no idea. No, I don't know about that.
Yes, I do know that there's a lot on offer now from various companies on digital platforms for tier 3 options to start a pension, mostly for the informal sector.
It was actually a referral from someone who knows someone in People's Pensions Trust.
No, please.
One of the oldest pension trusts I'm saying, also Ghana.